Hi, everyone. This is your final lecture for week 3 in technical writing. This covers one of my favorite topics. This one's called Hip-Hop Pedagogies. Again, pedagogy was that big word for teaching strategies. So like hip-hop teaching strategies. It comes from this book chapter, Staying on Our Grind, What Hip-Hop Pedagogies Offer to Technical Writing by Marcos Del Hierro. He starts in kind of a historical way. If you remember at the beginning of this course, that's kind of the way I started everything off was let's look at the history of technical writing. Well, Del Hierro is going to say here, let's start by thinking about the origins of hip hop. And he says that hip hop culture, in his view, grew as a response to systemic racial and colonial oppression of young people of color in post-industrial New York. And so I think he's talking here about the second industrial revolution, thinking about like coming out of that in the 1920s or 1930s. Um, and he's saying, hey, hip hop came out of wanting to resist these big industrial processes, maybe associated with upper class and white New Yorkers. That he says young people of color needed kind of a counterculture to that, or a type of resistance. And so he says, actually, though it's different and done in the streets and on albums, that hey, this hip hop culture is not all that different from technical writing. He says technical communicative practices coming out of non-Western traditions, such as the hip hop examples and methods I will present later in this chapter, are seen as irrelevant to dominant understandings of the field. And that is a major problem for scholars and students coming from non-Western communities. And so again, getting back to that premise that's kind of really at the heart of this course is maybe changing what we think of technical writing as. And he says, hey, it doesn't have to be this Western pragmatic problem-solving thing. It can be artistic, creative. It can be hip hop. And so what does he mean by that? Well, part of what he means is that we need to make space in the field for other cultures, from the dominant white hegemonic narrative that maybe dominates most fields, but especially ours when we think about, um, yeah, again, cold, detached, neutral kinds of technical writing. So he says, in a decolonial and anti-racist move, more scholars need to center technology as it relates to culture. If we are continued, if we are, sorry, there's not supposed to be a period here. More scholars need to center technology as it relates to culture if we are to continue making spaces that honor non-Western rhetorical traditions and ways of knowing. And so, again, writing about technical writing, writing about types of design, but thinking about them, in a way that allows non-Western traditions to come through. And so he continues that if we recognize that culture matters, both existing in an organization and those held by individual members, then technical communication must recognize that workplaces are populated by different kinds of bodies and subjectivities that complicate what a workplace is, how it functions, and its particular technologies. And so, it's not a new thing anymore in the 21st century. But diversity, equity, and inclusion, as we think back also to the social justice turn stuff from earlier in this semester, we now look at 21st century workplaces as composed of different kinds of voices and different kinds of people. But I think part of what Del Hierro is asking here is, are we looking at the practices in the workplace? Are we looking at the functions of the workplace? Are we looking at the technologies in the workplace as different as a result of the various kinds of people that now work in our workplaces? And so how do we center that conversation? How do we kind of pull it apart and make space? That's kind of the rest of this. And so he makes an argument for why hip hop matters to technical writing. First, he talks about its technical innovation. So in the same way that technical communicators come up with new apps, new designs that change how we interact with maybe our iPhone, with our laptops, with our screens, he says, hey, hip hop does the same thing. Hip hop invented, for example, the record scratch. And he says using a technology in a new way is exactly the kinds of things that happen in the field of technical writing. He says that hip hop has complex modes of communication, despite policing of those modes of communication. So it's not only words, but it's also a beat, it's also a sample. These things all go into the piece of communication that change just what the words mean. And so we think about it in the same way in our technical writing. When we think about some of the assignments in this course, right? I've asked you to do some design work. I've asked you to think about grids. How do they communicate beyond just the words? Next, he says hip hop digital booklets are something that matter to technical writing. I think he's using this as a longhand for the word songs, but give me a second and I'll come back to how they're digital booklets. He gives, for example, the 10 Crack Commandments by Biggie, 99 Problems by Jay-Z. This article was written, I think, just a couple years ago, but we could add to it maybe Not Like Us. But what these digital booklets have in common is that they give a particular set of instructions or set of information to draw on vocabulary from our course that tell you how to be in hip hop spaces. And so the 10 Crack Commandments gives business information about drug dealing. 99 Problems goes into obstacles that appear in hip hop workspaces. And he says, hey, these aren't that different from an employee handbook or from a student handbook, as we talked about in the previous lecture. I said, Not Like Us, for example, it's not just any hip hop song, but Not Like Us gives us a set of values that we have in common, and then a set of values that Drake has in common with his crew. And basically what Kendrick is saying is, here's the list of rules for being one of us, I think, being in hip hop and rap culture. And he's also giving a list of what not to do. And so those are the kinds of hip hop digital booklets that Del Hero is talking about, and the way he's trying to get us to think about, think about rap songs in the same way that we think about instruction manuals and so on. The last thing he brings up is the cipher. The cipher, I think, is what we would call maybe like a rap battle, where two rappers are going to have rhymes about each other, and maybe you'll have a circle of people oohing and eyeing and giving feedback. But he says, hey, this is the hip hop workspace. This is where people see what you can do. They give feedback. You can edit and you can revise based on that feedback. And so again, he's saying, the cipher, while it's, the rap battle is something we picture from like the movie 8 Mile, that maybe happens in like abandoned warehouses, that happens out on the street, something like that. He says that's actually not so different from a workplace in the way we talk about it in technical writing. And so for teachers, he leaves some of the instructions for me, and you'll see it come through in your assignment. But he says, hey, we have to embrace discomfort. And we have to see what is produced and seeing what is produced is one of the most powerful behaviors a teacher can model as well as an invaluable experience for students. To create the conditions for engaging classroom experiences where students can offer, create, test, and interrogate knowledge, they must feel willing to take intellectual risks with each other. And so hopefully the discussions have enabled you to get kind of comfortable with who each other are and the kinds of work you tend to produce. I'm going to ask you to work a little bit with songs and with creativity in this next in this module this week. And so I'm going to ask you to take a big intellectual risk. I don't think we'll go deep into hip hop because again, in the use case that he describes, he talks about having time to kind of research a particular rapper or maybe even a particular time period or album. We just don't have that kind of time in a 5-week course. So I'm gonna shorten that a little bit, but I am gonna ask you to take these kinds of intellectual risks. And then he concludes by saying we must find ways of breaking the norms and making noise all through the halls of the academy, if merely to remind ourselves that we are entire human beings in the room and not just floating heads, extra commas there, sorry about that, not just floating heads consuming knowledge. And so, yeah, I'm gonna ask you to work a little bit with the songs that you like, a little bit with the creative stuff that you've listened to recently and enjoy, and think about merging that with some of our technical communication practices like informing and instructing. Again, the idea there is that hopefully we develop a new level of comfort with each other. I'll ask us to reflect on how these songs, what they tell us about our shared workspace on Canvas. And the last part of that is, yeah, I hope we are making a little bit of noise. We're demonstrating again that technical writing isn't just this big, intellectual, scientific thing that has to use particular words and be, jargon-based, efficient, cold, neutral, but that it can be this cool, inspiring, uplifting, creative kind of endeavor also. So thanks for listening this week. I hope you enjoy the discussions. This is meant to be a difficult week in the sense that these things are theoretical and maybe a little bit difficult to conceptualize. But it's also supposed to be just kind of fun also because the assignments that these people produced, I think we're supposed to highlight some of the play and enjoyment that goes into technical writing. So thanks for listening. I'll look forward to seeing what you contribute. And yeah, thanks, guys.